Assassinating the Genocide Claim Against Israel. ClearMaps Analysis. Score 9 out of 50. This claim has done real damage. It did not stay in activist circles. It moved through campuses, media, institutions, and streets. It turned a legal and military question into a moral purity test. It raised the cost of accurate speech. It helped normalize a climate where Jewish students were harassed, where anti-Semitic incidents became the new baseline rather than a temporary spike, and where large parts of progressive culture treated the most serious accusation available as settled fact long before any court reached a merits finding. October 7 was the clarifying moment. Within days, while bodies were still being identified and hostages were still being held, significant parts of the Western progressive space moved to genocide language directed at Israel. Equivocal or absent condemnation of the massacre itself became common in the same spaces. A map that can absorb the clearest recent example of intentional mass killing of Jews and immediately reframe the response as genocide is not operating as careful analysis. It is operating as identity protection. The claim functions as a hybrid. Progressive identity politics supplies the status incentives, the oppressor-oppressed binary, and the purity tests. Deeper, older religious maps supply additional force. Classical Islamic texts and traditions that treat Jews as permanent adversaries produce extremely high identity fusion and near-zero error correction on the question of Jewish self-determination. That older map supplies energy and purpose that the progressive claim then launders into secular moral language. The Palestinian population becomes instrumental, useful for pressure, useful for status, useful for the higher aim of eliminating the Jewish state, rather than the primary object of concern. This is the inversion the claim cannot survive. The posture that presents itself as solidarity with Palestinians functions as a shield for the very forces that treat Palestinian lives as expendable. It protects rejectionist leadership incentives. It raises the political and moral cost of any realistic path that would require defeating those forces. It keeps the population locked inside a conflict whose continuation benefits the actors the claim refuses to confront. In outcome, the loudest pro-Palestine map is anti-Palestinian. International bodies that themselves score poorly on the same metrics, the United Nations system at 16 out of 50, the ICC at 16, supply cover. Their provisional language and multi-year procedural delays are converted by the claim into certainty. Treating those institutions as neutral arbiters gives them unearned authority. They are low-scoring systems. The claim uses them without requiring them to be accurate. That is the cost structure. Now the maps. Map 1, minds. Score 2 out of 10. The human mind was not designed for truth. It was shaped for survival in small groups where acceptance often mattered more than accuracy. Once a belief fuses with identity, the mind protects the model. Here the fusion is extreme. The claim is not treated as a testable proposition about specific intent. It is treated as a moral absolute that defines the speaker's solidarity and progressive purity. Revising it risks social exile, career damage, or moral condemnation. Higher intelligence frequently produces more elaborate defenses rather than faster correction. The mind functions as protective code. Map 2, incentives and coordination. Score 2 out of 10. Systems produce what they reward. Maximal accusation and moral certainty generate status, engagement, funding, academic capital, and political leverage. Nuance or insistence on the legal threshold of specific intent reduce those payoffs. High-profile voices inside the system face limited personal downside for over-prediction. What is actually tracked and rewarded is visible purity of condemnation. Incentives dominate any stated concern for accurate models. Map 3, status and capture, score 1 out of 10. Beliefs function as purity and membership tests. Affirming genocide signals rank. Softer language is treated as moral failure. The cost of dissent is high. Social demotion, exclusion, professional penalties, or branding as genocide denier. The move that collapses the conversation into just admit you like bombing brown babies is purity enforcement. It converts refusal of the label into proof of monstrosity and ends inquiry. Belief and belonging are tightly fused. Map 4, error correction, score 2 out of 10. Error correction is fragile. surfacing the legal requirement of specific intent, the absence of a final judicial finding, the documented intent of October 7th, or comparative data carries social and professional risk. Debate is frequently framed as bad faith. Willingness to revise the foundational assertion remains low. Continuous high-effort defense is required. Low-friction correction is not the default. That is the runaway train. Map 5, Scale. Score 2 out of 10. Scale amplifies every other failure mode. Social media amplification, institutional capture, and global protest networks increase the distance between the claim and verifiable consequences. Quiet failure accumulates, elevated anti-Semitic incidents that have become the new flaw, polarization that reduces leverage for civilian protection, and the conversion of a military question into a moral identity test that cannot be updated without identity loss. The maps interact. Identity protective minds create incentives to defend status-linked maximal claims. Those claims become purity tests. The purity tests raise the price of error correction. At scale, the pattern becomes self-reinforcing. The maps do not require conspiracy. They only require the measured cost structure, tight identity fusion, status protection of the maximal accusation, and error correction made socially toxic. Once those features are in place, the system runs itself. Under existential framing, it escalates. It will keep running until the external costs finally exceed the internal rewards of staying wrong. Adherence to this map does not protect Palestinians. It protects the forces that use them. It raises the price of any path that would require defeating rejectionist leadership and older religious maps that view Jewish sovereignty itself as the problem. It keeps Palestinians locked inside a conflict whose continuation benefits the very actors the claim refuses to name. That is the operating cost of the claim.